Well, kia ora, infrastructure whānau. Te Waihanga, the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, has been tasked with delivering transformative change in our sector. And one of these transformative change opportunities that presents itself right now that we certainly believe is critical is the reform of the Resource Management Act. We want to run a little poll, and there's going to be a number of these little polls, and the first one is going to be a little bit old school and a little bit analog. I'm really interested because of, we've got an audience here of infrastructure professionals. You guys have been dealing with this thing, some of you for 30 years now, and no doubt have had a range of experiences. But I'd like you to stretch your legs and take this opportunity to show our team, and our team is sort of smattered around the audience, just how important this is to you. So if you've been involved in a project that's gone a bit pear-shaped, it's gone a bit sideways, if you've had a suboptimal consenting experience or felt that there was a disproportionate share of consenting costs or an extended period of time to gain consent on your project, and you'd like to show our team just how important it is to you that we get this reform right, we'd love you to take to your feet and stand up and show us right now what it means to you and how important this is. Kia ora, folks, and thank you so much for showing that leadership, because it isn't through the Infrastructure Commission that we're going to solve this. It's through our collective leadership and the opportunity for you guys to tell us what it is that matters to you so that we can draft this strategy. It's New Zealand's strategy for infrastructure, not the Infrastructure Commission's strategy. We just have the privilege of holding the pen. So if you could take out your phones, and particularly for those of you who have had the opportunity to be involved in the delivery of projects and seen some of the challenges, I wanted to use this opportunity today to really engage with the audience and use the technology that we've got. So grab out your phones and we'll go to the first question, which is about the Resource Management Act. And it's about this question of reform. And we're really interested in you taking the opportunity to vote on what you think the most important aspect of reform is. The questions are there, and hopefully the tech's working. We should be able to see the results coming up live. So we're seeing consenting risk is really important to this audience. Hopefully the results are sort of updating as we go. There we go. The time taken to consent is a big one for people. Great to see that dynamically updating. Thanks so much for your contribution there. Hopefully everyone's had the chance to make a vote. They're still moving. I think time taken is definitely taking the cake there, so that's good to see. The next question we have for you today, and hopefully we can seamlessly transition through, is regarding our housing. A big factor and a big influence in some of the work we're doing in the strategy right now is looking at the cost of housing, planning, and we're really interested in understanding from this audience in particular how you see the role and the impediments to the development of more houses in our cities. So planning policy, about a quarter of respondents, but massively we're seeing infrastructure funding and financing coming out on top there, 52% so far of responses. Not surprising, but we have seen some good progress in this space. But interestingly enough, with COVID, huge contraction in council revenues has made it really difficult for local government to invest, which has been a real challenge. So it's interesting to see that coming through as well. So we'll keep rolling on the questions. Next question. We'll go back one. So funding transport, particularly if you live in this great city, it's something that you will have experienced and you will no doubt have a view on. One of the questions we're really interested in is whether you support the evolution of the way we fund our transport infrastructure from largely fuel excise taxes and road user charges to some methodology which involves congestion pricing. Very interesting results, fantastic. 80%, I think that's pretty compelling. So MOT colleagues and NZTA colleagues in the audience today, I'm sure will be taking note of that one. Very interesting results. And part B of this question is a little bit stating the obvious, but we're quite interested to know, again, is this the type of priority that we should be elevating in the strategy to the very highest level? We want to see it now, do we want to see it soon, or not actually a priority at all? Not sure if the polling's going to work on this one. There we go. So interesting again, about 2/3 of responses saying right now, and about 1/3 saying we need to explore some better alternatives. So interesting, if you've looked at this around the world, lots of different cities have had a crack at congestion pricing, a number of different methodologies. I lived in Sydney for a number of years, and we had little tags on our windscreens for crossing the harbour bridge. There's lots of different ways of doing it, but it's great to see that there's motivation and there's a real desire to keep kicking on with this. So really, from this part of the presentation, I just wanted to sort of talk about the Infrastructure Commission, where we've come from and where we're heading to over the next 12 months. There's a hell of a lot going on in our program, as you'll be well aware, and the expectations are pretty high. A little bit about me. I'm a civil engineer. I'm a farm kid from Southland. I started my career in the construction industry working for Mainzeal on a project down in Gorge Road, an apartment building, and got to know or became pretty familiar with some of the challenges that the sector faces. We're also supported by a really strong team at the Infrastructure Commission, both in our major projects and advisory team, where we've got some of the leading practitioners in public-private partnerships. We've got engineering resources in amongst that team, some legal and commercial skills as well, which are very valuable in providing some good support. In our strategy team, we've got a number of economists, ex-Treasury folks, and some really good crew who are actually doing our sector state of plays in there at the moment as well. This slide I really wanted to just highlight and just study for a second to see what the role of the Infrastructure Commission is in terms of the pipeline, which is really the subject of this particular session. And if you study this chart, you'll see an enormous investment that's coming down, or proposed investment that's coming down the pipeline in our transport infrastructure space, more than doubling the output of the sector within 3 years. And the challenge when you've got an infrastructure deficit of the scale that New Zealand has is we're starting to see these types of graphs or investment intentions emerging, not just in transport, but also in health and education and a whole range, particularly three waters, right across the system of infrastructure. And the challenge for us here is really, is this a graph that we believe is sustainable, that's achievable? Do we want to grow our market in our transport delivery space by 100% in 3 years? Or is this the type of graph and the type of investment intentions or pipeline that will create cost pressure and exacerbate these sort of supply-demand cycles that we've seen creating issues, particularly in the civil construction sector over the last few years? So the strategy and particularly the pipeline is really looking to evolve from quite a static list of investment intentions to a more dynamic view that's understanding what are these binding constraints? You know, what is the capacity of these individual subsectors and regions to deliver? And what is the right level of investment to be targeting such that we're not exacerbating these demand and supply cycles? And when we're going into a fiscal contractionary period like we've seen with COVID and local government is sort of retreating in terms of investment, what can we do to stimulate that investment centrally and fill the gap? Now this is a number that we've seen floated around. Shamabeel and Sense Partners did some really good work trying to, I guess, quantify just how big is this deficit. And I guess it starts out with an understanding of where we want to get to and where we are today. In terms of the work that Infrastructure Commission's doing here, our current focus And the strategy is on developing state of play reports by sector, and then really looking to understand, based on these future intentions, what the gap is between where we are today and where we'd like to get to. In terms of the tools available to us to start addressing this deficit, we are seeing a range of different funding and financing tools emerge, but there's still some real challenges, with local government, like I said, particularly under huge pressure with a massive pipeline of Three Waters investment ahead of it, and some real difficulty innovating and raising capital to deliver these projects in an environment where we heard from the Mayor Phil Goff this morning saying, 60% of revenue at risk in Auckland City, and how that translates to funding these investments. But we know it's significant, and we know that currently in our pipeline, we have just over 1,600 projects from 82 different organisations listed, representing $47 billion of investment intentions. 25 billion of those 47 are listed as funded investments. And what's quite interesting to note in the pipeline is actually the classes of investment that are largely absent. If you look in our pipeline right now, there's actually very little in relative terms of Three Waters investment, which highlights to me that there's a real uncertainty at local government level in how and when they can make those commitments and then publish that data to the market. But it is something that we're working quite closely with local government on in particular. And over time, we are making a lot of investment into the technology in the pipeline so that we can give a much more educated view of not just stated investment intentions, but a pre-qualified view of what that likely delivery will be when you adjust for these binding constraints in the industry, and then overlay some sensible kind of growth targets in amongst that as well. The strategy has been full on, and like I said, this is a huge focus for the team right now. This is a little timeline just showing where we've come from. So we're less than a year old as an organisation, but in that 12 months that we've been around, the team have been pretty flat out with the state of play reports. Like I said, in September next year, we published the draft of our strategy to our Minister Robertson. And then we're hoping that strategy is adopted in March the following year. So work is progressing pretty quickly in that space. And we're not sort of sitting on our hands waiting for the the strategy to be complete before we're kicking on. Our major projects team are heavily involved supporting the industry, and in particular, central government agencies right now. So just a quick summary of the things that we're involved in today. In the education space, working on the expansion of Wakatipu High School PPP, Marlborough Schools projects down there of about $250 million, providing direct support for major projects in the health space with Dunedin Hospital, New Zealand's biggest vertical project in our history, and also providing quite a bit of support to the health infrastructure unit in their establishment and developing a good pre-qualified program of health infrastructure delivery. In the water space, we're working with our colleagues at DIA on the reform program, and we've developed a deep dive report which will be coming out shortly on Three Waters quite specifically. In that financing space, there's a lot of activity going on as well. We've been working together with MB on the development of the unsolicited bids framework, on the refinancing guidance for the existing PPPs that are in the system, on review of the investment management system, and with our colleagues at Treasury, and we see that as a really important piece of work to ensure that we're getting the quality of projects coming in the next few years with this big investment push. And then finally, in that finance space, a lot of work and effort going into the development of the pipeline, and in particular evolving the pipeline from a stated list of investment intentions to this more pre-qualified understanding of what's actually possible and what we should be aiming for. In the planning space, the RMA Reform is something we're really focused on right now, and supporting our colleagues at the Ministry for the Environment there and our Minister with some advice on that. In the construction space, we've developed some early contractor involvement guidance. We've currently running a review of the Transmission Gully project, and we look to publish some findings for that in the first quarter of next year. And supporting the Construction Sector Accord, which is a fantastic initiative with a hell of a lot of really good work streams, everything from special conditions of contract under 3910 and so on, right through to mates in construction and mental health, which is really important work. The New Zealand Defence Force we're supporting with accommodation, messing and dining, and some quite large investment at Linton down there. And then various project business cases, everything from the Antarctic New Zealand redevelopment at Scott Base through to various budget bids. The final one that we're doing in the construction sector at the moment is we're soon to release a study on the impacts of COVID on the sector, and that's a study that we've partnered with Deloitte to produce. So, in summing, we are developing a strategy for 30 years for infrastructure in New Zealand, but it isn't our strategy, it's a strategy for you and hopefully by you. We do need your support. We're going to be coming out pretty consistently over the next 3 to 4 months, talking to as many people as we can. We don't have all the answers. We really need your help and support to write this strategy. And like I said, it's our privilege to hold the pen, but it's absolutely a strategy for New Zealand. So please take the opportunity to engage when we come out and say good day. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Cheers.